Holy Readers. Welcome to week 12 of 2025 here at Holy Holy. What a great accomplishment. We have finished the Torah and we are on into the book of Joshua. This is an exciting time in our reading and I hope that you're enjoying it. This week, we're going to recap the reading from March the 17th to March the 23rd. So this includes that ending of Deuteronomy, chapters 32, 33, and 34. And then we begin the book of Joshua with chapters 1 through 17. We've also covered Psalm 37 and 69. And finally, we're continuing our reading in 1 Corinthians by reading chapters 2 through 8. So the book of Joshua is the sixth book in the Old Testament, and it serves as a wonderful bridge between the Torah and our historical books. But I always think this is a great time to talk about the arrangement of the books in the Old Testament, because in the Christian Old Testament, we arrange the books differently than in the Hebrew Old Testament. Now, it's the exact same books, no more, no less, and there is no conspiracy. So what happened was in the 3rd to 2nd century BCE, more people spoke Greek than they did Hebrew, because remember that the Jews were part of the diaspora, which is the scattering. And in Alexandria, Egypt, they begin to translate the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek so that more Jews could read it. And as they did that, they grouped these books differently according to literary genre. So we have the books of wisdom or the prophetic books. But in the Hebrew ordering of the Old Testament, it's broken down into 3 sections. And they comprise, as a singular unit, the Tanakh. That's what the Hebrew Old Testament is called, the Tanakh. And it's an acronym. So the T stands for Torah, the N stands for Nevi'im, and the K stands for Ketuvim. So the Torah is exactly what you would expect: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But the Nevi'im, which is also called the prophets, it's divided into 2 parts. You've got the former prophets and the latter prophets. What's interesting is that the books of Joshua and Judges, Samuel and Kings, there are historical books, but they are included in the former prophets in the Nevi'im. I think that's really interesting because although Joshua is not overtly a prophet, he does perform miracles like the crossing of the Jordan. Those waters part there so that Israel can go through. And then we see Joshua leading them into the promised land. So Joshua, the book of Joshua, is part of the prophets. Then we have the Ketuvim, and the Ketuvim is known as the writings. And this is just a real diverse grouping of writings. So it includes things like Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Song of Solomon, Lamentations, Esther, and Ecclesiastes. But this diverse literary style, it includes both wisdom literature and historical narrative. And this is why I want to bring this up. It's because the way that these ancient writers composed the Hebrew Bible was incredibly thought out. And we've talked a little bit about bridges between books, especially in the Torah, how the end of one book will bridge with the beginning of the next book, making really beautiful seams where they're woven together. But I believe that these 3 parts, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim of the Tanakh, the way that they are arranged are also weaving themselves together to create one unified book. So let me show you that. Now, the Torah begins with the book of Genesis, right? And right in the beginning of Genesis, we find the tree of life and God's instruction to Adam and Eve. And that if Adam and Eve will obey God's instruction and his command, it will lead to life by way of life in Eden and partaking of the tree of life. But we know that Adam and Eve disobey God's command, disobey God's instruction, are exiled from the garden, taken away from the tree of life. So they no longer have the tree of life. So that's the story in the beginning of the Torah, the T. But then in the Nevi'im, we start with Joshua. And this is what Joshua 1:8 says. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. So right here, we have a man that's called to meditate on the instruction of the Lord day and night. The Ketuvim then starts with the book of Psalms. And Psalms starts with these introductory chapters, if you will, chapters 1 and 2. So here's what Psalm 1 says. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Listen, he is like a tree planted by the streams of water. So we've got the tree of life in God's instruction in Genesis. We've got a man meditating on the law in Joshua. And then Psalm 1 brings them all together that if you meditate on the law day and night, and it becomes a delight to you, then you shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bring forth your fruit in your season. The leaf also shall not wither. Whatsoever you doeth shall prosper. So, inadvertently, we become the tree of life as we partake of the Torah. And what does a tree do? It produces fruit. We find the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians, which we just read. And then fruit is being able to feed those around us, to bless those around us. They see the fruit of our lives, and then they become blessed. So we become the tree of life to those around us. What a powerful image. And I believe that was so intentional. Isaiah picks this up because he talks about us becoming mighty oaks of righteousness. And then this is even carried over where Jesus is crucified on a tree, and he becomes new life for us to partake of. And then we find the tree of life in the book of Revelation by the streams of water, producing fruit, and its leaves are for the healing of the nations. So it's a beautiful theme that's woven all the way throughout. Let's finish talking about the book of Joshua next week, but let's move on to the book of Psalms, chapter 69. And the reason I want to highlight this is it's because it is one of the most quoted Psalms and most quoted Old Testament scriptures in the New Testament. And so it's a lament song that is sung by David. It's attributed to King David. But most of the suffering that David alludes to about himself in Psalm 69 is later attributed to Jesus in the New Testament. So let me give you 4 examples of that. The first is John 15:25, where verse 4 is cited, where David's sufferings are applied to Jesus's rejection. Then you've got Romans 15:3, where he applies verse 9 to Jesus, saying, "The reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me." Then we've got Matthew 27:34, and this fulfills verse 21 of Psalm 69, where Jesus is given vinegar to drink on the cross. And then finally, Acts 1:20 applies the curses of verse 25 to Judas Iscariot. So as you're reading, look for these things and see if you can put them together and apply them. So let's quickly move on to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians was written by Paul to the church of Corinth, likely in AD 55, while Paul was in Ephesus. And we see this alluded to in 1 Corinthians 16:8. So Corinth was a very wealthy city on the shores there. It was a port city. They were known for their wealth, but they were also known for their immorality, and they worshiped many gods. But there was a church there that was thriving. And so Paul wrote to them, and he encouraged them to pursue holiness, to put away immorality. He addresses divisions, moral issues, doctrinal confusion, and he tries to answer some questions that the Corinthian church had asked him. So the divisions are chapters 1 through 4. Those address the divisions of the church there at Corinth. And then chapters 5-7, they address moral and ethical issues. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode today. Email me at jasmine@regenerationnashville.org. Like and share it. Tell your friends about Holy Holy. It's not too late to jump on in. Find us wherever you get your podcast, or you can watch us on Facebook and YouTube. I love you so much, and I'll see you next Monday. God bless.